Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box set's curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts. You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's a real trailblazer.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
It's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box set's curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box set's curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. It's Series 18. I always say what series it is because I'm kind of surprised myself. Session 11. My name's Sue MacDonald and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals and the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening. And we're joined by Dr. Louise Nuttall and Dr. Beth Mallory. And because we always do this to our guests, we're going to invite them to share their moment of the week. And I know Louise has got a moment, and I know Beth's got a moment. So should we start with Louise? Welcome, Louise, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for having me. My moment is that I went to watch my youngest in his first little gymnastics show a couple of days ago. And it was just quite emotional, and he's only 4. But I was amazed at how grown up and serious he looked, and of course kind of torn between imagining him as an Olympic gymnast, but also just kind of wanting to cry a little bit because he's my youngest and because he's growing up, and and he's so serious all of a sudden. So that was my little moment for this week, I think, that I'll remember.
I think that's quite a big moment. Just, well, isn't it exciting to think he might become a gymnast? He might not, of course. He might become something completely different.
That's why I wanted to use it for this, because I thought if he does, I've got it on record that I predicted it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's lovely. How about Beth? Can you compete? Welcome.
I can't really. No, I don't think I can. Thank you. My moment of the week is probably also related to my youngest, who's 5, but he's turning 6 on Friday. And it's an inset day. And how often does that happen when your birthday is usually a school day, but you get a reprieve? So he's very excited. And I told him a couple of days ago what our plans are, which are to go to a wildlife park, and he's going to be the VIP guest and go into all the enclosures and feed the animals that it's safe to do that with. So my moment of the week was telling him that and seeing how absolutely over the moon he was and how excited he is.
Wow. I think that there's going to be a lot of excitement with the whole family, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. An adult has to go in. So my husband and I are going to have to fight it out as to who gets
take a turn.
Feed the penguins. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your moments of the week. That's a really fantastic start to the hour, really. Now we let our guests have a little rest, and I'll just welcome all of you this evening. Now I know there'll be some new people with us, and we have some old friends. And now our new people may not know where the Maternity and Midwifery Hour came from, because I know people dial in from all over the world, a lot from the UK, but quite a lot from all over the world. And I just need to sort of say that we started, and the reason why the Maternity Hour started was right at the beginning of the first COVID shutdown. And that's because midwives, student midwives, clinicians themselves couldn't meet at study days or conferences. So we needed some means of connection and some means of getting information. So we started the Maternity Hour just with an hour, and we used to do a lot on COVID initially and how the services were changing and how education was changing. And it was, for me, chairing was a real delight at a very scary time, because of all the innovations and the way that midwives just got on with it and just did some really creative, interesting things, and also very much focused on women and babies and their students as well and their colleagues. And it was a very good teamy work time. And those of you who were around then in the UK will probably remember that. And I think we need sometimes to remember the good things that came out of COVID as well as the not so good things, and maybe keep some of those good things like the teamwork and the feeling together in the whole thing, which was really special. The other thing I need to tell you is the Maternity Midwifery Forum records everything. So if you should have a power cut, don't panic, because you can catch this up later because it would be recorded. And also that goes for everything that we do. You also have the opportunity on Friday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I know some of our people love to listen to that. You can have a podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, or you can have the link to the whole thing next Thursday through the Maternity and Midwifery Forum newsletter. Very handy to have that. And we do encourage you to share, because I think, and I say this every week, because every week we have fantastic guests who I learn so much from, and you will learn a lot from. And it's really good to share with your colleagues, because not all of them can make the evening. Some of them will be at work, and some of them will not just not know about it. Really good to share and talk about what you've learned, because that's the way you can kind of cement it in the brain and kind of think about how you can change practice, because mostly in these weeks you'll learn something that you want to put into practice. So that's we like you to share. And also right at the end, because I'm linking back to COVID again, I need to remind you to look after yourselves, because I'm very aware there's some nasty old bugs going around, as there always seem to be. And you need to look after yourselves, keep yourself healthy and well. Not too much chocolate, bit of exercise, 10,000 steps a day, and good healthy vitamins and everything. I'm getting off my soapbox now. Now, I've got to have to do the news bit. Now, we had yesterday, a couple of weeks ago, we had those wonderful student midwives talking about the difficulty of getting to the end of the training and not getting a job. And they've got another event they had yesterday in Birmingham City Centre, Fund Future Midwives. And I put a link in your resources. This is highlighting the lack of jobs. I understood from that last few weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, 3 jobs in the whole of England. 3 jobs for midwives. And you're all short of staff. You all feel it. So remember to sign the petition, raise it with your MP, and support your student midwives and your midwives who are looking for jobs. Right, now, also, I've also put a link to the NICE meningitis guidelines, because I thought you might get a lot of questions from women who are in your care or from people around you, because if you're a midwife, you know about everything, don't you? And people will ask you about, what's the signs of meningitis? Thought it would be useful for you to just have a look at the NICE guidelines, because it just gives an overview of everything and all the management and what you should do. We all know about the glass on the rash thing. Maybe not. Have a look and check that you know it. So that's there. Now, the other thing today that's happened was the installation of Sarah Mullally as the Archbishop of Canterbury, which was today. And some of you will remember that she was the chief nurse in England, which was lovely. Very, very wonderful person. Congratulations to her in that role. It's very, very fantastic to have a woman, the first woman in that role. So fab. Now, there's also some really good articles that I've also put on the links, and there was a good article that was in I think it was The Conversation is the reference. The full reference is there anyway. Guess what? Outcomes of a continuity of care in pregnancy and labour leads to good outcomes, less likely to be induced or have oxytocin, more likely to have a vaginal birth, more likely to have a midwife visit them at home after the birth, less likely to have a cesarean section, less likely to have baby admitted to special care, and half as likely to describe, and I think this is important, half as likely to describe their birth as traumatic. And if you think about whole of life, we like continuity of care, don't we, as individuals? I like having the same dentist. I like having the same hairdresser, I also need to say, today was the first meeting of the Maternity and Neonatal Task Force, which I mentioned last week. This is being chaired by Wes Streeting as Secretary of State. It's also got lots of people like Helen Cheen, Professor of Midwifery at University of Stirling, and Jill Walton, Chief Exec of the RCM, and Claire Harmer at the Chief Executive of SANS. They're going to meet apparently every 6 to 8 weeks, so there wasn't much released as yet. I suspect in the next few days we'll get a sort of press release, so I'll share next week. I have to have my notes to keep up with all of this. And there's also a very interesting article, I have to share this with you, on breastfeeding with young infants and about the physiology of it, and it's physiologic infant care. And what I loved about it is there's lots of research, and it's all research based and with lots of recommendations, but it's got a wonderful little pictures which you can use for mums, which is physiologic infant care, supporting breastfeeding, sleep and well-being. And it gives what you do during the night time, what you do in the daytime. If you don't want to read all the recommendations, though they're very good, because it's about safe sleeping and that sort of stuff, this is really good to have in your bag to show mums and help them get some successful breastfeeding going. Anyway, now I'm chasing through because I've got two fantastic guests and we've got a bit of research, which is wonderful. I'd love to have research hot off the press and from the people who are doing it, because it really means something. Sometimes it can, you can read research, it's not quite as interesting, but if you hear it and then you go off and read it, then it's really interesting. And we're going to be talking about language and language in pregnancy loss and the language used in healthcare settings, which can, we know that what we say to women and their families, they remember incredibly. So it's really important that we get it right. And we're going to look at that in this session. And I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Louise Nuttall, postdoctoral research assistant at the University College London. And she's a postdoctoral research assistant on pregnancy loss project at the University College and a former senior lecturer in English language and linguistics at the University of Huddersfield. She's worked with Dr. Bess Mallory on projects seeking to increase awareness of the impact language has in the context of loss during pregnancy. So welcome, Louise. The screen is now yours, and thank you so much for coming to share your work this evening. It's yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So for that introduction, I'm here with Beth, as Sue said, who is, I should say, the project lead and the person who originated this work and has been working on this for a lot longer than me. But I'm going to start today to introduce the project and hand over to Beth about halfway through to talk about another side of the research. So far, the research has focused on experiences of the language used in UK clinical settings, such as hospitals and GP surgeries, around the loss of a baby at any time during pregnancy. As part of this, a really important part of this has been listening to the experiences and perspectives of a really diverse group of people with recent experience of pregnancy loss, alongside healthcare professionals such as midwives and doctors and others involved in their care. And the aim has been to gain a better understanding of the language that's being used, but also to support midwives and other professionals to navigate what are extremely challenging and, I'm sure, distressing situations to be in. So we hope that some of this will be of interest to this audience today, and we'd really welcome thoughts and feedback on this as well, this research, as it's still ongoing. And I'm going to start by giving a little bit of context for why this research is important, why we think language matters, alongside all of the many other very important considerations and pressures involved in caring for people who experience pregnancy loss. I'm then going to introduce the ESTELT project and the data that was collected before looking at a few of the recurring themes or issues that cropped up again and again in this data. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Beth, who's going to speak about some of the recommendations that have arisen from the research and the practical communicative strategies that have emerged from the conversations we've had. And finally, Beth will talk about where the research is going next, how we hope to implement some of these findings into practice, and how you can get involved if you wish. So we have lots of people to acknowledge supporting and collaborating on this research. So the research was funded in the first instance by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, in association with the charities Tommy's and Sands. And we also had the Miscarriage Association and Petals as collaborators in this too. It's been guided by an expert advisory group made up of clinicians, policymakers, and the representatives of multiple charities. And a special mention also goes to Dr. Eloise Parr, who worked on this project with Beth in the initial data collection and analysis stages. So why does language matter? Well, as a bit of context, we might say that the need for the awareness of language around pregnancy loss has been recognised for a very long time as an important aspect of care by clinicians. This can be seen in just a few examples given here of the kinds of articles and publications that have been seen in medical journals for many decades now. So in these articles and in others in the UK and overseas, clinicians report on the impact that specific language choices have on their patients, often mentioning the distress or the longer-term trauma that certain terminology has been seen to have on someone who's going through a loss during pregnancy. And they often call out specific problematic terms as part of this. For example, in the 1985 letter to the Lancet, it was the term spontaneous abortion that was being highlighted as one that needed replacing. And as well as this medical discussion, there's also a more public conversation around this that's been seen again and again in recent years. So you can see a couple of examples there, an article on the left from Glamour magazine in 2020, which was kind of reporting on a viral social media conversation around the word miscarriage. And then on the right, the Peanuts app's 2021 renaming revolution, which was a crowdsourced list of medical terms around fertility and pregnancy that its users felt to be outdated or in some way offensive to them. So the ESTELT project arose in this context. It arose out of a need to investigate this empirically, to explore issues around the language in the context of pregnancy loss from the perspectives of the people who experienced it, and to try to identify how language can be best used to support them and the people caring for them in a healthcare context. So in the course of 2023, the project collected data from people from across the UK who had experience of accessing or delivering healthcare for pregnancy loss. So a total of 339 participants took part voluntarily. 290 of these were participants with lived experience of pregnancy loss, and 49 were healthcare professionals. And all the participants provided written testimonies on the impact of language in receiving or delivering care during and after pregnancy loss. And 40 of these were then invited to take part in one of 10 listening and discussion groups, either with other lived experience participants or other healthcare professionals. And we're going to focus mainly today on the data from the discussion groups. And as you can see, although this wasn't the intention, the project ended up with just 2 focus groups for the healthcare professional cohort, as recruitment to this was much trickier than for the lived experience cohort. Hundreds more people, in fact, expressed interest in participating in the listening and discussion group for the lived experiencer cohort than the project was actually able to accommodate. And this was taken to reflect the need for the research. Before I go on to look at some of the findings or what the participants said, it's worth just mentioning our own language choices in doing the research. So the first hurdle in designing the project was deciding what to call it. And this was done entirely by Beth, I should say, who you'll hear from in a minute, based on the findings of the existing limited research on this. So in discussing this issue, of course, we need to find ways of referring to the loss of a baby during pregnancy that are both widely recognisable and which encompass all the types of loss that this includes. So terms like baby and pregnancy loss are the ones that we use, and they won't align with everyone's preferences. But in fact, we are aware of some issues around the phrase pregnancy loss, which I'll mention in a bit. But they are used here because research suggests them to be the least harmful options at this time, potentially. Oh, skipping ahead there a little bit. So I'm going to talk through some of the main themes or the issues that emerge from the focus group data. And I'm going to tell you about these and some of the words from the participants themselves. Going to be lots of quotes from the data, and some of these testimonies I should mention are quite upsetting, as you might expect. But giving voice to these experiences is also really important, we think. So many of the participants spoke about the medical terminology they'd been exposed to as implying a sense of failure or blame in some way. Diagnostic language such as miscarriage and incompetent cervix were among those that were quite often disliked by participants for this reason. So, for example, to see one quote from the data, a participant said, "I've always hated the word miscarriage because it sounds quite blamey, because it's like, oh, the women didn't carry the baby properly, your body miscarried it." And incompetent cervix also raised some of the same issues. So this participant said, "I can't get my head around, and I still can't get my head around where I suddenly have a weakened cervix or an incompetent cervix. I don't like those terms because it makes me feel as if the fault lies with me. So there's a lot of self-blame tied up in this language for these individuals. And there were lots of other very common phrases and words that triggered similar feelings for participants. So including the phrase pregnancy loss itself. For some participants in the study, the very word loss suggested negligence. And the same was true for missed miscarriage. Another theme that recurred in the data was a kind of sense of invalidation, or the feeling that the words or phrases could downplay what was happening to them or didn't reflect its impact on them and the grief they felt. So terms such as biochemical and chemical pregnancy, when used to describe losses early in pregnancy, for example, were felt to call into question the reality of the pregnancy. And to them, it's invalidated the sense of loss. So here's an example for one participant who said, "It feels very downplayed, like chemical miscarriage, chemical pregnancy, feels like it's in your head almost." And the same was said for empty sac, which was highlighted a few times, sounding almost like it wasn't there, even though they said that they did believe it was. It just makes you feel a bit crazy. Another related topic that was brought up was the idea of a misrepresentation of the physical experience. This was particularly the case for losses in the second trimester of pregnancy. So participants would suggest that the language just to them didn't reflect the physical trauma of what they went through in as part of the loss. So, for example, the phrase "passing baby" or "passing little one," although it's gentle language and it's supportive, to this participant, it was as if there wasn't the labouring part. It completely diminished the whole experience that I would have to labour and to give birth to a baby. And this was often quite linked to dissatisfaction with the term miscarriage, particularly when used to describe losses in the second trimester. And an underlying sense in some responses that losses at different stages of pregnancy may be somehow more or less traumatic and categorised differently, which is obviously a tricky concept to discuss. One participant said, "I struggled with the idea of it being termed a miscarriage because it was so far along that I didn't think of it as a miscarriage. A couple of good friends of mine have had miscarriages late in the first trimester, but I suppose the difference here is that I had to push out a fetus." And finally, really common across the responses was the idea that medical terminology didn't adequately for them convey the emotional significance of what they've been through. So one participant said, if instead of using words like miscarriage or ectopic, when you say "we've lost babies," it to them conveys the gravity of what they've been through. Another really common finding in the data was experiences of confusion around clinical terminology. So there are many instances where particular terms were said to have caused some uncertainty, lack of clarity, and even false hope for some individuals. So one participant here said, "I did not understand what the empty sac really meant and was given false hope to wait a few more days." And another example, citing a term "primary transfusion," which is not an easily understood term with no immediate explanation of whether this was a good result or not. In this case, which is described as confusing and also a little bit frightening due to the lack of certainty as to what was going on. And in addition to this kind of uncertainty, the participants also comment on the emotional impact of this kind of technical language, describing it sometimes as feeling cold. So an example here is when one participant says, "We had somebody talk about the fetal demise, and that seemed like a really clinical, strange way of saying it." And in fact, often a lot of language related to the baby, so for example, products of conception or tissue, are often highlighted as having this kind of cold, alienating feeling by denying personhood to what they perceive as a baby and clashing with their own understanding of what they had lost. So in one really interesting example here, one participant talks about the midwives and those who were close during the labour experience as having been really careful and sensitive, But then there being a shift when they went through the investigations, they became really clinical, and it just seemed to be, this is what it's medically called, and that's it. No matter how many times I referred to my son as a son, and that he was called Tommy, he, in this case a consultant, just wouldn't return the same respect. And finally, this is where I lead into more what Beth is going to talk about, which is the more positive side of this, which is the experiences of some participants of true validation through language. So we're finding the right words, often with the help of a midwife or someone else involved in their care, finding the language which accurately reflected their experience as being something really validating, sometimes transformative, as part of their recovery. So there's an example here from one participant who said, I had to really accept this term, pregnancy loss. I couldn't at the beginning because I felt like we made a choice to have a termination for medical reasons, and to call it a pregnancy loss, I didn't feel like I was allowed to be included in that group of women. Until weirdly, the bereavement midwife said, no, you are, it's a pregnancy loss, and I felt really validated then. I also felt that I was allowed to be a bit more sad about it, as it was referred to as pregnancy loss. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Beth to talk more about the recommendations and the practical kind of strategies that came out of the research.
Thanks, Louise.
Sorry.
I'm introducing Beth. Do you want to get onto the full screen, Louise? Because I think it's quite good if people are watching on small screens. That's possible.
So stop sharing. Is that what you want me to do?
No, just go on to the main, like the little thing at the bottom. It's right, there's about the third along. That's it. Perfect. Sorry, and I'll just introduce Beth now, who's lecturer in English linguistics and a health communication specialist, also at UCH, and her research focuses on the effects of linguistic choice around pregnancy loss in particular. She's worked with clinicians, academics from other disciplines and third sector organisations to better understand the roles language plays in experience of pregnancy endings and public understanding of such experiences. So welcome, Beth. The screen is now yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I am going to have to keep asking Louise for the next slide. I'm sorry, I'm going to be doing Chris Whitty impressions. That reference is going to get very dated at some point, but I'm still convinced that COVID was yesterday. So for now, I'm going to carry on. I'm a bit echoey. Is that me, or is that something else? If it's okay for everybody else, I'll crack on. Okay, so as Louise said, I am going to be talking firstly about the recommendations that we've reached for one-to-one clinical interactions. I will mention later on the guidelines that we've come up with for kind of what we call mass communication contexts, in which we think about the kinds of things that you might want to put into guidelines, websites, anything that's patient-facing, essentially. But we're really going to focus for now on the recommendations that can be put into clinical practice, because they're the most kind of practical recommendations that we can make to people who are in those clinical settings. So next slide, please, Louise. So as Louise said, we conducted this study, and the purpose really was to reach a conclusion about the types of strategies we could recommend for communicative practices around loss. And this was intended to go beyond the kinds of quite vague recommendations that we have in general around health communications. So increasingly, there is an emphasis on reflective listening and on mirroring technique. And I think that's all really important. But I think in really high stakes clinical interactions like those around loss and others, birth trauma, abortion, lots of different contexts where the stakes are really high and where memories seem to be encoded a little bit differently around communication and the words that are being used. I think we probably do need to go a little bit further in terms of the recommendations that we make. But the tricky thing about that, about providing recommendations, is that you need to have a good amount of data to make really robust recommendations. So we wanted to make sure that our recommendations were empirical and were based on the findings that Louise has just outlined. So the recommendations that we came up with from this research were, firstly, going with reflective listening. So it is always a good idea to mirror the language that somebody is using in a clinical setting, especially with kind of the kinds of things that really do provide a key to somebody's experience. So if somebody is not using the word baby or is using the word baby, for example, you want to make sure that you go with that. It's an obvious thing, but it can be a really good way of kind of tailoring your language to somebody to where somebody is and making sure that you use that kind of language. We did have lots of experiences recounted to us in the study of, Louise said one of them, I kept in the PMRT process, I kept saying my son's name and they just wouldn't respond with that name. They just kept talking about the baby and using kind of cold clinical language in a way that felt to that participant really inappropriate and unkind, really. So it is about that kind of reflective listening and making sure that an individual is listened to and respected. But I think, as I said, that we need to go beyond that, because that's good practice across healthcare. And I think in these really high stakes contexts where actually you can make the difference between somebody remembering a really awful experience as a really awful experience and somebody having an extra layer of trauma on top of that awful experience. So we also, in the healthcare professional cohort that Louise mentioned for the focus groups, we did have a cohort of people who support families who've been through pregnancy and baby loss in the aftermath, especially those who were involved with the charity Petals, one of our partners. And they kind of said, look, we have a really limited number of hours that we can spend with somebody. And if they need to spend a lot of that time unpicking the language that was used around their care, we don't actually even have time to scratch the surface in terms of the actual trauma. So it's something that really can impede recovery and psychological well-being in the long term. So for that reason, I think it's really important to go beyond reflective listening and to actively elicit preferences. This is something that's maybe a little bit harder to do in clinical practice, harder to implement. And we are, as I'll talk about in a second, looking at ways of kind of providing a scaffold for that. That might be like a form that you can fill out, or you can give to the patient or fill out with them, that says, this is how I want to talk about this experience that I'm going through. They might choose that they don't want to do that, and that's fine. But what we heard was that language is really, really pivotal in this situation. And I think a lot of people would choose to do that. In the meantime, while we don't have that kind of scaffolding system available, I think eliciting preference just looks like someone saying to a patient, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. Could you tell me a little bit about how you'd like me to speak to you about it? And especially around pregnancy after loss, I think that's also really key. Kind of, I can see in your notes that this happened, and I'm really sorry to see that. Could you tell me a little bit about it in your own words so that I know what kind of language I should be using, that kind of thing. And in terms of framing difficult language, I think Louise mentioned this as well. We found really kind of positive experiences around really negative language where a healthcare professional had framed the language very carefully. So where language that they knew was going to be experienced as difficult had to be used. For example, feticide. You know, feticide has to be used in some contexts of TFMR, but people said, you know, it was the word was used, but it was used in a way that, you know, said we have to use this word, but what it means is that you're making a compassionate choice to end your baby's suffering. And because it was framed like that, it didn't have the kind of awful impact that it had for other people who didn't have that experience, who said, you know, feticide is a word that haunts me. And likewise, you know, during the post-mortem process, if that's something that someone is going through, people did say in their contributions to our research, you know, I wasn't prepared for the post-mortem report, and the language that was used was horrible. And that is actually an experience that I have personal experience of. But other people said, you know, the bereavement midwife really prepared us for the awful language that was going to be in the post-mortem report, and the fact that we would be seeing things and reading things that we really could have done without seeing, really. But we wanted to know everything, and she went through it with us and made sure that the first time that we read that report, she was with us and she was telling us what things meant, so that we weren't feeling frightened and kind of untethered and not knowing what was happening. So framing that difficult language can be another really useful strategy for making sure that any difficult language doesn't become kind of all-consuming and a really traumatic experience for somebody. Could I have the next slide, please, Louise? Oh, I forgot that we had, yeah. So what we talked about in terms of mirroring of language, this is a contribution from one of our healthcare professional participants, who said, I want to talk in this research about the importance of using the same language the patient or client uses. For example, many people use the phrase born sleeping, others use baby loss, but both of these can cause distress in their own way for some other people. So, you know, we did come across this in the lived experience research cohort as well. Some people really didn't like euphemisms like born sleeping, and other people really did like them. And in terms of, you know, using the language that the patient really wants, we did have one of our participants saying, I keep traveling back to the hospital because they know me, because they know that my baby that I gave birth to at 13 weeks was Munchkin, and they know that the one that was a miscarriage was Junebug, and they know that the one that she was pregnant with at that point was Twinkle. And because they know them all, and they know that I like to talk to them by their name, they'll say, what's this one called? And they will then talk about them using that name. So she kept going back to the same early pregnancy unit because they were adopting her way of talking about her experiences. And that was really, really valuable and really validating for her. Could I have the next slide, please, Louise? Thank you. And then in terms of preference elicitation, as I said, this is another of our kind of key recommendations. Could I have the next slide? And this is another contribution from one of our healthcare professional participants, and she was talking about the kind of experience of not knowing necessarily if they're not speaking first, if you have to go into the room and be the first one to speak. She said, my experience has been that it can be hard if parents aren't speaking first. It can be hard to know quite how to approach language because no two parents are the same, how they would refer to their loss, and what's right for one person might not be right for another. I think we as professionals are the ones perhaps starting the conversation, and you need to navigate that quite carefully. So this is the idea that, you know, we would like to provide some kind of evidence-based scaffold for providing that kind of elicitation. But in the meantime, we kind of need to get the message out that actually it's okay to ask and it would be appreciated. Could I have the next slide, please? And this kind of further reinforces that point, I think. So this is a lived experience participant who said in a focus group, some of the people that we got to know that were the best, some of them asked us what language we preferred. I think that's always a really good way to start something. It's like, I know you've had a loss and we're so sorry for the loss of your daughter and their name. How would you prefer that we refer to it? Do you want her to be referred to as name? And, you know, that is helpful. And I think that's something that maybe people are more comfortable doing. after 24 weeks, you know, when you've got the kind of validation, I suppose, of the processes around stillbirth. But I think our participants who had experience of loss pre-24 weeks also kind of expressed that need for or that desire to have the language that they wanted elicited from them by the healthcare professionals who were looking after them. Could I have the next slide, please, Louise? Thank you very much. And then in response to that other participant, somebody then said, I think the asking solves a lot of the language questions. I think if you could ask me what language I like, I genuinely think that if I were just given a few more choices and questions and asked what I like, and even given options, our counsellor does that a lot more, and she sounds you out a bit more. So that's, you know, just reinforcing that point that actually asking is okay and actually really helpful a lot of the time. Can I have the next slide, please, Louise? And I think what all that reinforces is that we need to encourage this open dialogue about language as standard, because it's not just the sort of way that you communicate it. It actually is part of the care experience that is key. And one of my kind of soapbox conversation topics is that we need to have more communication training in all forms of healthcare education. But also we do need to come up with some kind of way of scaffolding those conversations. And this participant kind of spontaneously came up with this idea on her own, which was really interesting. She said, when they give you that first tablet, she's talking about mid-trimester loss and being induced. Why don't they give you a little form and say, this is completely optional, but would you like to write down? This is a birth plan form, a second trimester birth plan form, and you can tick it or leave it blank. Like, how do you want to refer to these things? So she was suggesting that, you know, we provide some kind of scaffolding for these conversations to make it possible for somebody to express their language preferences. Could you, next slide, please, Louise? And as I said, framing difficult language is another thing. And this is from a healthcare professional who said, I think that's what you can do in those situations to kind of bridge the gap between the healthcare professional and the patient, and making sure patients understand what that means. If we literally just take the time to explain it and explain, you know, you've lost a pregnancy or a baby and this means this, that can make all the difference. Next slide, please. And this is the example that I was talking about. Oh no, I was talking about feticide, wasn't I? But somebody who was talking about the phrase termination for medical reasons and how difficult they found that. And they said, you know, they did use termination for medical reasons. And as soon as I heard that, I must admit, I started to cry straight off. But they did talk around it in more gentle terms, and that, you know, he wouldn't feel any pain and that kind of thing. So really, really appreciating that framing and that softening of that language. Next slide, please. And this is the example that I talked about too early in terms of the bereavement midwife going through the postmortem and preparing them for the language that they would find upsetting. And she said, and we did, because it was very clinical. Next slide, please. And this is one of the people who's involved in aftercare. And she said, you know, offering to be the bridge between the legal clinical terminology and people's hearts, that feels like the right thing to do. There are certain things we can't get away from in terms of terminology clinically, but we can do something about how we express that. So framing is so important. Next slide, please. And I think the other thing that we really need to say is the importance of not reframing someone's own conceptualization of what they're experiencing. So that's something that we saw a couple of times, and it was a particularly traumatic experience for people. So this is a particularly horrible example of this, where somebody said, when I found out my baby had no heartbeat, the consultant said to me, think of it like a manufacturing production line, and your baby is getting rid of defective product. And that has obviously lived in this person's memory and probably will do for decades to come, because it was such a terrible thing to hear. Could I have the next slide, please, Louise? And likewise, this other person said, I found it very difficult when my GP said to me, I kept saying my baby died, and he kept saying, you might find it easier if you frame it not that your baby died, but that your pregnancy ended. Next slide, please, Louise. So overall, we concluded that there is absolutely no one-size-fits-all approach. We need to pay more attention to the effects of linguistic choices in healthcare contexts surrounding pregnancy loss. And we do need an approach to communication which respects the language needs and preferences of individuals wherever that's possible. And as I said, there are contexts where that's not possible. But wherever it is possible, we really do need to make sure we do that for the reasons that we've outlined using the participant data. Next slide, please, Louise. And we wanted to make this available to all of you. We have created, I can't take too much of the credit for this at all. Louise has mostly created a wonderful free CPD accredited course for healthcare professionals. It's available if you use the QR code here, which is, and this covers all the things that we've talked about today in a lot more detail, and also covers the recommendations for mass communication that I mentioned. And it's free for 2 weeks. So if you want to do this, you have 2 weeks to complete it for free once you enroll. So please do that. And if you have any trouble finding the free option, please do let us know and we can help. Next slide, please, Louise. And in terms of next steps and where we're going next, I'll just do this quickly because I'm running out of time. But as I said, we also conducted a quantitative survey, trying to work towards that kind of standardized set of terminology which will minimize harm for most people in mass communication contexts. And we continue to engage with policymakers and clinicians to develop and implement the trauma-informed framework for clinical interactions, which I mentioned, that kind of scaffold approach. And we are also working with a patient and public involvement and engagement forum, which is intended to guide that research going forward, with a particular emphasis on communities who are marginalised and at greater risk of adverse outcomes in pregnancy. And in terms of engagement with policymakers, we do have an event which is free to everybody. If you happen to be in London or could be in London on the 13th of April, from 11:30 to 12:30, we are having a roundtable event on improving communication during adverse gestational events. We've got a fantastic lineup for this. We have the MP who is the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on maternity, Michelle Welsh, 2 vice chairs of the all-party parliamentary group on baby loss, Sadiq Bhatti and Alison Bennett. We have Kate Brintworth, Chief Midwifery Officer for England, and Donald Peebles, also from NHS England, and Professor Alex Heasel, Professor Anna David, Karen Joash from Imperial College. A fantastic lineup. The head of the Miscarriage Association is going to be a really, really fantastic event. So please do use that QR code to sign up and book. Yeah, I hope to see lots of you there. It's going to be a really, really fantastic event. So thank you very much for listening, and please do get in touch if there's anything that you'd like to follow up on with us. And thank you for having us, Sue.
No problem. Thank you so much, Beth. That was really interesting. And look at those fantastic references for people. Fabulous. So we'll leave if you can leave those on the screen just for a moment, Louise. So anyone that's watching, these aren't on the resource list, but here they are on the presentation. So you either have to get your cameras out and quickly take a picture, or you'll have to watch this whole thing again with your colleagues. These references. Now, with the references we always provide, you don't have to read everything, but you will find these are really interesting pieces of work, and you might want to read more than one by the looks of it. And the round table. Now, can I just ask, Beth, is the round table a Zoom, or is it
No, it's only in person at the moment. I don't know.
Okay.
We may be able to. I think we don't have much tech support, so I don't know if I will be
okay.
to pull off hosting a roundtable. Louise will be there too, but I don't know if between us we can kind of manage. But it's something that I am looking into, so I will update you on that. But at the moment, people can only come if they can actually come in person.
Right, okay.
And we have a 350 seat venue to fill, so I really do want people to come if they can.
Now, I hope everyone's listening to that. Now, I know now we have people. We've got folk from Ireland, Qatar, and Australia this evening.
Wow.
So hello to you
Hello,
all.
yeah.
And I think some of these might be new people. Now, anyone who's participating, you can put in your questions into the live chat box and they'll come through to me. Now I'm looking over here because they come on my other screen. So if you have questions, put them in now and we can put Louise and Beth on the spot, except I think they'll be able to cope with anything really. Thank you so much. Now I noticed that Beth was coping with a bit of echo, but I think everybody on who was in the call is hearing beautifully. So Beth was fighting against that. We had a gremlin in the system, folks, which is very frustrating, but hopefully all is well. And I found that really, really interesting. And one of the interesting things I thought was you seem to find it easier to get women and patients, if you like, than healthcare professionals. Do you think that was just because people were very busy or not feeling that it was something that was of help to them? Because some of the things they were saying were really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress in the last few years in terms of maybe raising the profile of why this is important. And I think one of the things that was a problem when I started with this work was that anecdotally, so I came to this work through lived experience and through kind of knowing and seeing in peer support communities that there was a huge amount of distress being caused by language. And as a linguist, thinking, why is nobody actually sort of trying to solve this problem, trying to make these experiences easier? But I don't know that actually there was widespread understanding that this is a big deal for people. And I think what came out of the focus groups were 2 years ago now. And I think what came out of them really strongly was that people who had lived experience of this, who weren't healthcare professionals, so some of our healthcare professionals also had lived experience, but I think it's a very different experience going through any kind of pregnancy loss if you are already familiar with the terminology versus coming to it fresh. You're not desensitized to it at all. So they are going through what might be the most traumatic experience of their lives and hearing language which they find really difficult for the first time. So it was really kind of something that people really wanted to talk to us about, people with lived experience, whereas the focus groups that I had with healthcare professionals, we didn't get many healthcare professionals on board, but the ones we did, they were kind of like, I don't know, is this a problem? And I had to really tease out, I had to do a lot of the asking of questions in those focus groups, whereas the lived experience ones, the experiences just flowed. I just kind of said, okay, we're here to talk about how language and communication played a role in your experience of pregnancy loss. And then I basically didn't say anything else for the next hour and a half or something, because people just went, oh my goodness, like I really needed to talk about this. And it was cathartic for them. So I think that was the difference. And I think we have made strides in terms of showing how important it is. And I think having the data really helps with that. But I think that there was a lack of awareness, and I think that's totally understandable, because if you are using this language day in, day out, it becomes difficult to sort of recognize it and to I think that's true of all of us, that it's definitely true of academics, right? We struggle not to use like lots of academic jargon because it's just the norm for us. But it's just that I don't think we've talked enough about the problem until now.
No, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you're saying academics, it sort of tunes in the fact we're used to our language, so we just kind of stick to it, and it's really good for us actually to think differently. So it must have been really useful for those healthcare practitioners to come into this setting and actually start thinking about it and hopefully sharing.
I hope so.
Because some of the examples you were sharing of what women were saying that they were told, like the mechanistic one of think of it as your body's just that
getting rid of a defective product.
It's awful, not very sensitive really, but I'm sure the person didn't mean it to be so unkind.
No, I think it's that. No, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I think is changing now, actually, is that I think there was a sense maybe kind of 10 years ago, and I always think when I talk about this of that example of that adaptation of the Adam Kay book, This Is Going to Hurt, where they have communication training in that, and it's really funny, and he's being like, clients, you have to call everybody clients, don't say patients, and I always think of that example, and communication training was sort of something in healthcare to roll your eyes at, and actually I think now it's something that actually is there to help, because I think the vast majority of healthcare professionals, especially those who are treating people who are going through pregnancy loss or who have been through pregnancy loss, really don't want to add to that. They want to do everything they can not to add to that. But they're so busy and so stretched that actually it's really difficult to know how best to do that. So hopefully what we're doing is sort of alleviating that burden a little bit. Because I'm sure that person was well-meaning and was sort of, the defective product comment was probably intended to convey, the pregnancy was not viable and couldn't ever have proceeded, and your body knew that and was trying to get rid of it, which is potentially quite a comforting idea, but just not expressed in a way that actually was received in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes, I mean, I think sometimes we fill the gap of silence with things, and you find yourself saying things that are not appropriate, and
of course, we all do that.
Backtrack a little bit
when the stakes are so high. It's really difficult. But I think if we have, and I think that's where, we don't have, there is this massive gap in training, where actually communication is, and it's not a soft skill, it's an absolute fundamental, but it's not treated as such yet. And I think that lets down healthcare professionals and patients at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, the other, I love the evidence-based scaffolding. That was a new term for me. Is this a new linguistic thing?
No, I think it's just a me thing. It's just something I've come up with.
Louise, would you agree with Beth?
Yeah, I think it's a Bethism. But it makes sense, right? It's a good metaphor.
It does actually make sense, and it feels as though it's a tool.
And
it's not a judgmental thing.
No, absolutely.
We need some way of doing it. And some of the, you had some really good points to be made for that, and I'm sort of very conscious of time chasing up, and I'm just going to check on see if nobody's put any questions yet, but someone has said, could they have the course link back?
Oh, yes.
Would you be able to do that, Louise?
Pop that up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's that's it. The free course. Now this looks fantastic. So does that contain all the things you've both talked about, or is it kind of more practical? And
more. So we've given you a kind of snapshot, a teaser of what in the course, but there's a lot more, and links to the kinds of things that we put in the references as well. So there's a huge amount in there. It only takes kind of 4 hours or something, and you can do it over 2 weeks and still have free access.
Fabulous.
Or you can upgrade and pay and have kind of longer access. But if you want to do it free, 2 weeks to do the 4 hours, and it's got a wealth of information based on that kind of evidence-based research that we've been doing.
Okay, so can I highlight that for any of you midwives who are doing a revalidation process at the moment, and actually that's only one within the 3 years towards your revalidation, this would be a really good activity to do to follow up the discussion we've had this evening, because it's kind of, this is a big added extra actually, and very good for a process that we need to really focus on, i.e. communication with women and families at a very difficult time. So it's all the things in your proficiencies and your midwives code. So I'm just putting a little ad out for anyone who's coming up for that. Now I'm afraid I have to say we've come to an end, because it's 8 o'clock, and I always say it's the shortest hour in the week. But I think actually there's one question I've got for both of you. Is this have you reached the end of this? Is there another bit that's carrying on? Because I know with these, I know that Beth was talking about research that's required, which there always is. Whenever you do a bit of research, there's more to come. But is this project continuing in a different form, or are you at the end of it? Is there
We're trying to get funding at the moment to continue it. It's continuing in a kind of piecemeal way at the moment. We are currently writing a funding bid to look at, Louise is kind of leading on this, to look at the specific experience of communication practices among kind of minoritized communities in the UK, which we're really excited about. And we are in the process as well of drawing up a quite large bid for a multi-year project as well. So yeah, we'll see what the future holds. But at the moment we're just kind of banging the drum for the research.
I think the issue around minoritized groups is that's really contemporary and really important, isn't it? I mean, I wish you all the luck with that. But I'm sure I'm going to say a big thank you to Louise and Beth on the audience's behalf, for it's been very now two people have come up with, can we squeeze 2 questions in?
2 questions, yeah.
Can we? Because I know that this is cheating a bit, because we should have finished, but never mind. We've got now Hayley Barlow. Hi Hayley. And Hayley says, where can I access the code for the 13th of April, please?
Oh,
yeah,
can we get the code back up? If not, it is on Eventbrite, so you can kind of search Eventbrite for it and book a ticket. Or equally, you can just Google me or Louise and find our emails and get in touch. Yeah, please
Fabulous. Do. And Hayley, tell your friends. That's fantastic.
Please do, and tell your friends about the course as well.
Fab. Okay. And Janet Morgan, hi Janet, says, is there not an alternative to the word loss?
Yes, there certainly is. There are various alternatives to the word loss. At the moment, one of the things that the quantitative research found was that loss, the phrase pregnancy loss, seems to be broadly preferable to any others. And some people really, really don't like loss, but they seem to be in the minority. And that's what that kind of quantitative research was intended to do. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, there's lots more about it in the course. Was intended to kind of say, well, lots of people don't seem to like the word miscarriage, lots of people don't seem to like the word loss. Is that a general pattern? And actually it's not. So there are words in the middle where some people really don't like them, but other people don't mind them. And we're not so much focused on those in terms of campaigning for replacing them. And we're really working at the margins in terms of the ones that really aren't acceptable to anybody, basically. And loss doesn't seem to be one of those.
No, that's fabulous. Thank you. That's perfect. So we cheated a bit, having a bit of extra time, but I'm very conscious because Beth is still at work and has to get home, and I'm very conscious of trains and things. So a big thank you to Beth and Louise, and thank you also to Angelo. Now Angelo's in the background making sure this is all going to be beautifully recorded and packaged for the podcast on Friday and to be available next week. And those of you who are watching tonight, do use that opportunity to share with your colleagues, because there's a really important issue, fantastic references, and of course there's a nice round table coming up, and this 2-week free program, which is fabulous. And in the meantime, I'll just say a big thank you to everyone for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the evening. I certainly learned a lot, and if nothing else, about scaffolding. Yes, that's a wonderful positive thing for scaffolding. And so thank you, Louise and Beth, and we'll say good night. Take care of yourselves.
You too.
Happy.
Thanks for having us, Sue.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.